Welcome to our session called Stop Including Us, Arguments Against Inclusion and for Diversity. Now, we delivered this at the IATEFL conference 2024 in Brighton, and we want to make it available for all educators to be able to share. We'd just like to say thank you to IATEFL for having us and for all the participants who attended our talk as well. We are Eltonics, an education consultancy specialising in teacher development, creativity, and social justice education. And before we start, it's important that you know a little bit about us to better understand our identities and which positions we're speaking from.
So I'm Sarah. My pronouns are she, her. And here is some information about me.
And I'm C. My pronouns are they, them. And here is some information about me. Now, take a moment to draw your own glass on some paper. Think about your identity and write some words in the glass. We'll come back to these glasses a little later in the session. You might want to pause the video now to do that. So, Sarah, what will we be doing in this session?
Good question, C. So here are some questions that we want to answer with you in this session. Our first question is, what are inclusion strategies? Then, how do students react to inclusion strategies? How can social justice education help? And what does a social justice framework look like in practice? And it's important to tell you at this point that this session is based on extensive research that we carried out with transgender and gender non-binary, gender creative students in Greece in 2022 and 2023. And these students were teenagers and young adults at the time. So the voices that you're going to hear in this session today are all real students' voices. As a result, there might be a little bit of spicy language coming up as well.
Okay, we're going to start with a short demo lesson. So we imagine that you are my students and you're about 14 years old. At this point, you need to decide whether you are student A or student B. Okay. For our purposes, I'm going to be student A, and Sarah, you're going to be student B.
Okay.
All right. So if you're student A, you should keep your eyes open, but B's, you need to close your eyes now.
Okay.
A's, take a look at the screen now. Have a look at the photo. Take a moment to remember it. And stop. Lovely. Okay. Now, B's, you can open your eyes and have a look at the picture. A's, close your eyes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So the dad in the family you've just seen says, our son has been getting bullied at school. The other kids have been saying that our family isn't normal. Now, without showing or describing the family to each other, Sarah, we're going to discuss these questions. So I was student A, I saw the first photograph, and you're student B, you saw the second photograph. So the questions are, why do you think the other children are saying this? And what should the family do? Now, as student A, I think these questions are really difficult for me to answer. I actually can't see a reason why the students are saying this. I don't know why they've been bullied at school. It's not obvious, it's not clear. And so therefore I'm
Ah,
not quite sure what the family should do. What
okay,
about you?
that's interesting because I think there's a clear, probably a clear reason why students are saying, the family isn't normal in the sense that the family that I had maybe don't look like the families that we see most often. So there is
Mm,
perhaps a clear reason that for well, yeah, there's a reason maybe why, a clear reason why the other children are saying this. I think the family should do something.
mm-hmm.
Perhaps they should approach the school to let them know the issue, and maybe then the school can work with the students to make sure that this doesn't continue happening.
Okay, super. Okay. Um, no, we won't do this now, but this is what the materials do next. So have a look at the phrases highlighted in blue here, Sarah. What tense is this?
Oh, it's a difficult question for me. It's the present perfect continuous, right?
Super, yeah, okay. And then the materials basically ask the students to work out the meaning, look at the form of the target language before then going on to practice it.
Okay, so we've been students, right, see, but let's put
Yeah.
our teacher hats back on right now. And we're going to reflect a little bit on the materials that we just worked with. And of course, if you were participating at home as well, then you can do this as well. So again, see, we're not going to show each other or describe the family to each other, but let's discuss, how did you as student A and me as student B answer the questions differently? And as a reminder, here were the questions, right?
Mm. Well, I was kind of stumped, wasn't I? I didn't really have anything to say. It was really difficult for me to answer. It could have been a million and one reasons why the children getting bullied, but no real obvious reason.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I kind of identified perhaps a reason for this happening. So I
Mm.
had a lot more to say about it.
Yeah.
And just so you know, if whether you were student A or student B, these are the families. These were the ones that we were talking about. And, as C said, for student A, it was very difficult to understand the problems that this family face and why this was happening. And the context might have even seemed a bit strange, perhaps even amusing to you in relation to this family at the bottom right. And if your family looks like this, it might even be a little bit confronting. It was much easier for me as student B to discuss the queer family in this context, and I could come up with some reasons for the problem, had more ideas about what the family should do, and we might also have sympathized with them as well.
Mm.
So the materials that we just explored as students are designed around inclusion strategies. But what do inclusion strategies aim to do? Well, inclusion strategies encourage teachers to select or even create materials which don't exclusively present normalized identities. And by normalized identities, we're especially talking about white, heterosexual, able-bodied, middle upper class, Western identities. They aim to make underrepresented identities more visible as well.
Mm.
So these inclusive materials and others were used in English language classrooms. So let's meet the students and see what they said about the materials and their experiences in the classroom. And because these are authentic voices, this is where the slightly spicy language comes in. So are
Yeah.
you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to get spicy.
All right, let's have a look at what the students had to say.
At a language school in 2021.
I just started classes at a language school near my house. I'm kind of stressed about it because all my documents say I'm a girl, but I'm a boy. Phew, that went better than I thought. She listened and accepted my pronouns.
Some weeks later,
Oh, it's great that you found so many similarities with these families. Most of your parents are married, like Teresa and Amanda, and I have a black cat.
But not all queer couples want to get married. Why do they make us seem so straight? What if you're poly? Some months later.
Great discussion, everyone. Okay, so we shouldn't bully people just because they have gay parents. We should be more tolerant of this. Gay people have a hard enough time already. So how can we help them?
Put up some rainbow flags to make people more aware.
Fuck, everyone's looking at me now. I feel like I'm gonna have a panic attack.
Here we fucking go again. Gay kid gets bullied, straight kids need to be tolerant, straight kids rescue us, blah, blah, blah. This is cringe. Okay, so let's reflect on these experiences and voices of the students. You might want to pause the video now and think about your answer to these questions. How did the students react to the materials? And why do you think they felt like this? So it seems that students are not responding well to these inclusion strategies. To find out why, let's look at how inclusion strategies work. So studies show that material writers and educators use two main strategies when designing such materials: usualization and actualization. Let's start by looking at usualization. Here's an example of a material which follows this principle. Students look at the family tree, which includes a queer couple who have adopted a child, and are asked to find two similarities and two differences between these families and their own. Now, students are exposed to the marginalised identity or community without any explicit commentary, however. The teacher doesn't explicitly comment on sexual orientation or queerness here. The more that students encounter LGBTQIA subjects, the more acclimatized they become, and this, in turn, reduces the feelings of threat or fear. What about actualizations?
Well, the material that we used earlier is a good example of actualization in practice. So in actualization, students are made explicitly aware that they're learning about, in this case, LGBTQIA lives and issues. Students are encouraged to engage with and discuss LGBTQIA lived experiences, and they're also encouraged to offer solutions. So both of these strategies are well-meaning, but what do our students say about them?
This is what they said after exposure to the usualization approach. Why do you think all queer people want to get married and have kids and wear suits and do all the weird shit that everyone else does? I'm not just queer, I'm an artist, a football player, I'm learning bass. Like, why always reduce me to queerness? Now, here you might want to stop the video again and think about the problem. Why do you think the students are saying this? So, hetero and gender normative standards are imposed on the queer community here. The usualization strategy looks for similarities between heterosexual cisgender ideals and lifestyles and that of queer individuals. So this strategy also assumes that heterosexual and cisgender people behave in a normalized way. There's an oversimplification of complex identities. We don't have single identities, so we cannot be reduced to single issues. This is relevant whether you are queer or not. And usualization leads to homonormativity. This approach expects that hetero and gender normative standards are recreated in queer communities, and in fact, all communities. These standards are imposed on queer individuals to make them more acceptable. Remember the queer male couple at the beginning, one of the photos that you saw? They're married, they're white, and they adopted black children. This appeals to a white savior complex when a white person acts upon from a position of superiority to rescue that person of color. So the materials are problematic in other ways. It flattens and fragments identities into single issues. This oversimplification of complex realities is a means of gentrifying queerness. What did students say about actualization, Sarah?
They had a lot to say about actualization. They said, it's like, just because I'm non-binary, I'm the authority on all non-binary people, and my teacher always gets me to comment, and it's tiring. They said, don't let people have debates on whether others deserve to have human rights. I went home and had a panic attack. And also, why are you always showing us getting bullied? We're not just victims, we're a bunch of other empowering stuff too. Now, once again, like earlier, you might want to pause the video at this point and just reflect. Why do you think the students are saying this? What do you think the problem is? So in actualization, in the first instance here, the student is being othered. In other words, teach all of us about you. And this exacerbates domination and marginalization paradigms. And LGBTQIA people in this respect are or become the other. Actualization objectifies certain groups of people as items for discussion, where those with the most power impose their views. And with actualization, marginalized or minority groups are positioned as internal victims existing on the periphery of school life. Actualization is a deficit-based model. And deficit-based models stereotype, in this case, LGBTQIA youth or other marginalized groups as doomed, rather than celebrating their unique strengths and resilience. Deficit models aim to elicit sympathy and tolerance for the marginalized group in a way that positions them as eternal victims. They're not empowering in any way. So, to better meet the needs of all of our students, we need a radically different approach. We need an approach which encourages all participants in educational systems to reevaluate what is taught in schools, which creates space for the interrogation of all structures of oppression in our courses and lessons, which is aimed at everyone and not just queer people, and which confronts and dismantles underlying causes of power and privilege. So C, do you know of an approach that does all of this?
You know what? I think I do. We think the best solution comes in the form of social justice education. And social justice education aims to confront, challenge, and demolish structural inequalities and discrimination in education systems and society at large. And social justice educators work towards understanding the myriad of ways racism, heteropatriarchy, homophobia, and other forms of oppression operate in schools and in society. It encourages action for social change in and out of the classroom and it encourages us to recognize our own privilege and power. And with that in mind, let's do that now, shall we, Sarah?
Yeah. So let's go back to our glasses. Remember, you drew one at the beginning of the session. So C and I listed several aspects of our identities when we introduced ourselves to you. Now, some of these aspects are still in the glass and some are outside the glass. Actually, Welsh, in my case, is stuck in the straw somewhere. Why do you think, C, they are divided in this way?
Looks like privileged, non-privileged identities here.
Exactly. So the identities on the outside of the glasses show power and privilege, and the identities left inside the glasses show a lack of power and privilege. And privilege shouldn't be invisible. Every educator should identify their own degrees of privilege and non-privilege to better understand their own social position in an unjust world.
Yeah, it's the first step in becoming a social justice educator. So, what we'd like you to do now is go back to your glass that you drew at the beginning of this session and circle the privileged aspects of your identity. Then perhaps reflect on this. So, Sarah, how can social justice education be implemented in the classroom?
Well, Altonics has a social justice framework that you can use in your lessons or across a series of lessons. And as you can see, there are 5 stages in this framework. We can see the aims of each stage or the rationale behind each stage, but we can't see the stage name. So you're going to help me out a little bit here.
Okay.
And you're going to help me guess what you think the names are. You might also want to pause the video at this point to see if you can do it at home. So the first stage is to sensitize students to human rights issues and check what they know.
Looking at the fabulous illustration there, I would say it's seeing.
Yes, good. The next stage is to develop empathy and critical thinking.
Empathy, heart, I would say feeling.
Yes. What about to encourage problem solving and creativity skills?
Thinking. Got to be thinking, yes.
To develop good citizens, to disrupt inequality, and to practice resistance.
Taking action, acting.
Yeah. And this is arguably the most important stage in the framework. And finally, to observe how our understanding and feelings have changed as a result of all of these previous stages.
Reflecting.
You're absolutely right. So see, what does this look like in the classroom, in a lesson or across a series of lessons?
Okay, yeah, good question. It could look like this. So for seeing, the students could read a text about a pro swimmer who suffered a health setback. Okay, and this swimmer is Korean American and also transgender. For feeling, students then discuss how the swimmer felt and how they feel when they suffer a setback. For thinking, students investigate another issue the swimmer faced, for example, being banned from a male swimming team, and explore other sporting injustices. For acting, students then choose an injustice they feel passionate about, and with the Olympics coming up soon, design an Olympic t-shirt with a logo and slogan to raise awareness of this issue. And then reflecting, students then decide which of their classmates' t-shirts they would buy and why. And then they ask that classmate questions about the issue and then say 3 things that they learnt about it.
Okay. So here are the questions that our session answered today. And in fact, the session itself was designed using our social justice education framework. So when we looked at inclusion strategies in practice, we encouraged you to
see.
Exactly. When we listen to the students' voices and experiences of inclusion strategies, you're encouraged to empathize with them. And so this was the
feel.
Yeah, the feel stage. By getting you to consider what social justice education is, how it works, as well as getting you to identify the stages in the framework, we encourage you to
think.
Exactly. So what stages are missing?
Act and reflect.
Exactly right. And the act and reflect is what we would like you to do as a result of having watched this session with us today. So this is our call to action. We would like you to tell a colleague what you learned about social justice education and why it's important. We'd like you to apply our social justice framework to your teaching and, of course, ask your students what they think of it. And as a reflection, based on what you learnt today and, of course, classroom practice, think about what you thought before, what you think now, what you used to do before, and what you'd like to do, what you want to do in the classroom now. And we'd like to leave you with a final thought. So Martin Luther King Jr. said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. But we must escape this, and social justice education empowers all students to become active and engaged citizens who recognize and challenge injustices wherever they see them to ensure that there's social justice and equity for all.
If you're interested, here is the super useful resources we consulted. And this just leaves us to say thank you very much for watching. We'd especially like to thank all the students that participated in our studies. Here are our contact details, and also you can find PDF of this presentation. And we have 2 upcoming courses coming up on Eltonics Bites, on supporting transgender and gender creative students, and social justice pedagogy. So do sign up to those if you're interested. Thank you so much.
Thank you.